with the right execution of PBM and hyper-personalization, you're looking at a 50% reduction in time to close, because it's not completely on the sales individual's shoulders to somehow, from the top-down selling perspective, get in front of that veto and convince them. They're getting help now.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer, sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
This episode is sponsored by Zant, the enterprise leader in sales engagement. Zant has authored the definitive guide to sales cadence. Get your copy at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. Hey there. Welcome to episode 274 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Ingresso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, my guest on this episode is Ari Capogeannis, Senior Director of Marketing at Cumulus Networks. Ari, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie. Very happy to be here, and great job with the name. Very complicated.
I was going to ask you how I did there. Thank you. We rehearsed that, actually, so I guess I have no excuse. Well, Ari, I'm excited about this topic. We're going to talk about growth marketing, specifically growth marketing through hyper-personalization. So before we get to that, though, I always like to ask my guest, as you know, for a brief introduction to your company, Cumulus Networks, and a little bit about your role there, your scope of marketing responsibility at Cumulus.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in charge of global demand generation here at Cumulus Networks. We're a startup running open source, modernizing the current data center layout and campus networks. My role, essentially, with many hats and a small team, is essentially beyond demand gen into customer success, partner enablement, you name it. It's a perfect fit for my view on demand gen 3.0, touching everything from net new to lifetime customer value. My background spans everything from Cumulus Networks to a large stint in the B2B SaaS financial management services space, all the way down to the military defense contract startup, where you're a couple employees and you're meeting with clients in a tie one day, and as soon as they're out the door, you're up on the roof unclogging drains. So I've got a lot of end-to-end experience from the very small shop to the enterprise level, and it gives a great view into the different tactics we're talking about today and what we're going to dive into.
Sounds like your background's a perfect career journey for this topic here of growth marketing through hyper-personalization. So let's get into it. First of all, let's start with the why, right? We'll pretend Simon is here. Why is growth marketing through hyper-personalization? Before we get into it, you've got three pillars that you've prepared to discuss on the topic, but why growth marketing through hyper-personalization?
Yeah, it comes down to, if you want to boil it down to one thing, let's talk conversion rate optimization. And the fact if I have two billboards, one on either side of the street, and one side of the street's touting, we're number one, or buy this product, and then the other side of the street says, hey, Bernie, this product allows people interviewing individuals in the sales marketing realm to achieve 75% ROI, such as this company that's in the same space you are, your eyes are going to fixate on that, and that's going to be all you care about. It's relevant to you and what you do. As we move from the SMB model into targeting mid-market, we then move from these 1 and 2 person mom and pop shops to the decision-making unit with varying roles within it. So I can at that point just take, okay, I've got my robotic positioning in place beyond just touting that we're number one. There's going to be a different pain point for every one of those personas within that decision-making unit. And if you want to really, really scale your growth marketing, growth hacking, whatever you want to call it, that messaging has to be relevant to each of those individuals in those decision-making units.
Okay. So to your point, it really just needs to be relevant to each individual in that decision-making. I like the phrase unit or committee, but the body of decision makers. And of course, another relevant point associated with that, Ari, is that we live in this hyper-fast world, right? We're all dealing with digital inputs from all different directions. So anything that is less than personalized just doesn't get as much attention.
Yeah, you have a few seconds for a net new prospect that you're hoping to move into some sort of an awareness and engage with you. A few seconds, you got to put the kitchen sink in there as far as relevance goes for that individual.
Yep. Okay, so I know you've been speaking on this topic at different conferences, and you've teed up three pillars to growth marketing through hyper personalization. And I think really the first one that you've identified is, I think, what you call demand gen 3.0. Is that how you frame it up?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So, demand gen 1.0 would be the marketing orgs where you're tied to what you'd call marketing qualified leads, or whatever your internal speak would be. But that's kind of the biggest rift between marketing sales alignment at that point, because to generate a certain volume of MQLs, you can just ramp up some spend, kick them over the fence, and tell sales to go call your leads. 2.0 would be where sales and marketing align around the op number and pipeline in that regards. Well, more so the op number. It's getting past the idea that, we only manage the machine and it's only sales that deals with talking to these prospects.
So when you say op number, though, can you define what you mean by that?
Opportunity number. So from net new, you cross a certain threshold and marketing drew a line in the sand. Somebody came up with a scoring model and said, hey, these are going to be what marketing deems as qualified leads. We're going to tell sales to go after these people first. We can get a meeting going with them and they're valuable. We think we're going to generate pipeline from them. We're going to generate an opportunity from that. The old school 1.0 view is I have nothing to do with that. That's a sales guy on a call, a saleswoman talking to somebody. And what would I have to do with that? From the hyper-personalization standpoint, with proper alignment and technology that we have now, we can create digital experiences that address the pain points the sales individuals dealing with on the call by account, by role within those decision-making units.
Okay. And so when you talk about addressing those specific pain points, and you're referring to now Demand Gen 3.0.
The 3.0 model is really a holistic view as far as what we as marketers can actually contribute to from net new all the way to lifetime customer value. It's not just lead gen. It's not just coming up with a proper scoring model to enable my sales individuals to be more efficient. Take, for instance, typical organic lead volume in our space at one point in time. Because of our marketing scoring model, we might see 45% of our organic leads on average become MQLs. That's great from a volume perspective, but from a sales efficiency perspective, it's not great. Ideally, with a proper model and proper relevance, I can get that down to 15% and have sales be more efficient, and then enable them with proper messaging for each of the different roles within the decision-making units. For those individuals in the units, as they come back into our digital ecosystem, the technology we have in play now can actually have assets, messaging, and experiences that correlate with what they're currently talking to with the sales org.
Okay, so now we're talking about a whole lot more process and technology. So can you unpack that a little bit? Because, now we're really into the heart of this first pillar of demand generation, right? When you talk about having assets and deploying them, again, unpack that a little bit, Ari.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we as marketers get hyper-focused on always creating something new. I got a content team, so we're just going to generate more content. I got to generate new. More often than not, the population coming through buying my product are at certain stages of awareness and preference, and then they're moving forward, hopefully, or dropping off. And if something's converting well right now, it's still going to convert well in 6 months. I might have to update it, paint it, what have you. The big thing is, how am I taking all that content and leveraging the MarTech stack that I may or may not have and using it in an efficient, cohesive manner to enable my sales organization? What that means is I can take, for instance, for my vetoes from the top-down selling perspective, my C-level executives and the like, assets related to thought leadership, brand preference. How are they going to save money? That's what they care about, money and efficiency. Whereas the staff level that coming in are going to be the ones signing up for trials. They got time to kick the tires on the product. They may want to know the guts of it that the C-level could care less about. Take, for instance, in our competitive space, if I'm talking to somebody who's currently a Cisco shop and they're concerned with security, I should be able to take the assets I have relevant to that to make sure that via old school speak, let's say an email, unfortunately some people call email blasts a campaign, but take all your vehicles, email, paid channels on the website. That individual, through sales marketing alignment and knowing what the current pain points are being addressed, should get those assets right in front of them. And that's their aha moment. All right, the guy on the phone was talking about this. I kind of heard them. I kind of zoned out a bit. But now I'm seeing stuff directly related to the pain I'm currently experiencing and things assuaging my concerns with moving forward with this alternative option.
Okay, I knew I was going to ask you the next question, and I think this is where I want to ask it, Ari, and that is, so in order to deliver that content to the salesperson, you clearly need your MarTech stack. But what about staffing? What impact does this approach have on a marketing staff?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've said before to some people that MarTech stacks are amazing. There's the Stacky Awards, you name it. People take all this time to great little roadmaps. Look at everything we've got, and it ends up being a CMO or VP sort of budget posting. But as you dive into the guts of that, 60% of that technology isn't actually championed by anybody, so it's shelfware. And in actuality, some of the robust tools in the predictive analytics realm could be a full-time job. Mm-hmm. But nobody wants to have their career path trajectory determined by, I'm the one who runs this product. That's going to be good luck finding your next job. But the fact is, if I hone into the stuff that it can actually integrate, if I can focus on technologies that take the place of 4 or 5 separate technologies within my stack, I have a centralized point of data and a centralized point of managing these experiences. So for me, when I was at Sage Intact, we looked at our entire tech stack, and we had a great budget. But if you looked in there, you could actually see what technology you could manage as a 1 to 3 person unit that affected everything from sales enablement, targeting, predictive, all the way to on-site engagement in a cohesive manner. It's just a matter of looking at that tech stack and figuring out what the bloat is and what to hammer down on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. What about things like acquisition, engagement, retention? Where does that fit into this pillar?
Yeah, it's tech itself. If you look at any marketing plan, any solid demand gen plan, it's sort of the last piece. Somebody has a 7-point plan, a 9-point plan, a 10-point plan. The marketing technology is the last piece. If you're hitting the ground saying, hey, we've got this new predictive analytics tool, and that's our strategy for the year, you're setting yourself up for failure. First piece is customer interviews, customer messaging, customer pain points. The next step is alignment, of course, cross org. But then taking all that and being able to do your market segmentation, not just from the viewpoint of, from Moore's philosophy, big fish, little pond, I'm going to go after verticals. Verticals are going to be the way. Micro verticals are going to be next. As you take into consideration the fact that you're moving into mid-market organizations with these larger decision-making units, or I believe it was Gartner noting that 9.6 people on average are involved in the B2B buying cycle, you have X many different roles, X many different interests. And as you segment, you're segmenting not only by vertical, but by revenue range, the role within the decision-making unit, the varying levels of awareness, intent within those individuals in those accounts, and the stage at which they're at with potentially competitive platforms if you're looking at graduates and switchers in a competing market. That's going to determine what your avenues are as far as content packs, not only for enabling your sales org, but for enabling these prospects and these digital experiences.
Pretty advanced stuff here. Every sales rep executes a cadence when they reach out via email, phone, or social media to initiate a conversation with a potential prospect. The art of a cadence is determined based on a myriad of factors, fueled primarily by sales reps' intuition regarding the company and contact that's being pursued. However, there are a lot of questions that aren't always clear when initiating a conversation and creating a successful cadence. Zant has authored the Definitive Guide to Sales Cadence. This ebook answers questions such as how many times should the rep attempt contact, how long should the rep wait between attempts, what methods are most effective, and many more. Download your free copy of the Definitive Guide to Sales Cadence at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. Is that a good summary of the first pillar of demand generation? Because I know that you also want to talk about what you call the integrated omnichannel, and you define that as your second pillar. Is that right, Ari?
Correct. So the pillars really are the acquisition, engagement, and retention within the initiatives of that. The execution is that demand gen 3.0. 3.0 basically saying that's where we're at now. And if we can leverage market segmentation, my messaging, and the channels that we have combined with the vehicles that the traditional marketing levers that marketing uses on average to get these messages out there, we can drive this hyper personalization. People-based marketing, which I talk on a lot, is essentially going to a conference, seeing that you can't throw a stone without hitting the word ABM. I gave a presentation once and I told some friends the night prior, all right, I want you to track me. Every time I say ABM, you can hold me to doing a shot. And I went right into the conversation with that in mind, and I still slipped up 3 times. But the fact is, you come out of that, and it's like being in an advanced course somewhere with all these great ideas. I'm going to go back to the office. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then you figure out where your roadblocks are internally, whether it's budget, initiative, old school views, lack of alignment, and the like. But the fact is, as you take account-based marketing, it's more than just saying, okay, sales and marketing are going to get together. We're going to sit down, talk about what our target accounts are, and we're going to, quote, go after them. And then a year goes by, and you're at another SKO, and the sentiment is, we got to come up with a new target account list. Okay, what did you do the past year for those accounts? Well, nothing, but we tracked them. Okay, what did you do for the roles within those accounts as far as augmenting your database, getting the messaging right for the varying roles and responsibilities in there, and getting the messaging in front of those individuals? The people-based marketing aspect is the aspect of executing ABM at that microscopic view, not just by vertical, so that it resonates across the account, but by role and interest within those roles.
Okay, so again, to unpack that, you still develop a list, an account-based list,
Correct.
and then within those accounts, you're targeting specific roles. And are you saying that you're targeting the roles, or are you saying you're targeting the actual people by name within those roles, and then delivering your personalization to those people?
I don't want to show too much under the hood
Ah,
in the world of GDPR and compliance and all that. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do now. But I think the fact, the current exercise I've gone through is the worst thing that can happen during an alignment discussion on target accounts. My biggest thing is focusing on sales marketing alignment. And the last thing I want ever said in a meeting is marketing's going to tell us ... I've had a head of sales start with that phrase in a meeting, and I died inside, because then I knew I had to schedule 3, 4, 5 more meetings with people to assuage their concerns. I'm not here to tell you how to sell. A marketer cannot tell a sales individual how to sell. What we can do is take what they believe to be their target accounts, what they're thinking about drumming up for the year, in varying levels of science-based versus gut instinct, take that, run our predictive analytics against it, show them what the scoring is across those accounts, contact coverage, and then bolt on lookalikes. Send it back to sales. They're the ones, empowering this whole target play. They lock it down, and then we take basically a snapshot of metrics. The metrics for account engagement are completely different than your traditional lead metrics. It's more about awareness and how we're driving that awareness quarter over quarter and engagement therefrom.
So when you say you're going to review those metrics, you're talking about to what extent they're either already aware of your solution, or to what extent they're showing intent? Is that what you mean by reviewing the metrics?
Correct. So there's buying stage, essentially. What does our predictive analytics tell us what they're doing, not only on our website, but off our website? Are they researching key brand terms, key terms relevant to the products we sell? Has that research increased? Are they doing nothing? Did a sales individual come and say, hey, this would be a great account to close this year, and this is who I'm going to go after? But that account has shown no research whatsoever on our product. We have no contact coverage and not identifying anybody having gone to our website. From the website perspective in people-based marketing, I used to talk about website metrics being vanity metrics, but we're at the point now where I can get past the vanity metrics level of, say, we had 100,000 sessions for the month. I have a daily report that reports out by patch within global ultimate territory what the number of matched accounts are hitting our site by day, by engagement stage, and then tie that into smart plays within my organization to actually bubble up leads that are in market showing intent and notify our sales org. So at that point, yeah, we're getting comped extra on the sales side for closing target accounts, but we're making sure we don't leave crumbs on the table. And for those target accounts, letting the sales org know who's actually raised their hand right now and who they can actually talk to today that's showing a heavy intent.
From a tech standpoint, you've got to be using tools that do that intent-based signal analysis, right? Otherwise, how would you be able to do that?
Yeah, everybody and their mother wants to sell you intent right now. No offense to anybody out there. Intent's great, but it is kind of the new buzzword. There's not one vendor or solution out there that's not sending email right now talking about how they have intent data for you. The tricky part there is traditional walled gardens of information. Take, for instance, third-party review sites. We have intent. That's great, but does that mean I have to manage a whole nother set of data, a whole nother dashboard? How do I even somehow factor that into my day-to-day at scale without having to juggle 10, 20 different Excel files for a sales org that doesn't have the time to read one of them? My whole focus is diversifying intent from a core central point within our system. Anything that we can bring in, anything that we can bolt into what used to be just a traditional Marketo lead scoring, but bubbling in intent from varying sources, it's sort of like a stock portfolio. The more sources I have, the more agnostic or platform independent I am. I can plug and play what I want, enable my sales org from a central management point, and not have to have them consistently learn to recreate the wheel.
I'm picturing here a Bloomberg terminal, right? Which is really not one terminal; it's like 10. Is that what you and your team have in front of them? Like those kinds of screens?
No. That's my desk. And I've tried early on to show them that view. That makes eyes roll back in your heads. You lose it. That was great. That guy's amazing. Oh, I didn't know we had the mathematician working here. Don't know what to get from it. I'm just going to go back to doing what I was doing. My whole focus is that, especially from a demand gen perspective, we exist to feed sales and help sales be great at what they do without them having to do more work. If what we're doing is piling on to whatever they're already doing, it's a failure at that point in time.
Right. But in terms of you and your team, right? So that Bloomberg metaphor that I used, the Bloomberg terminal metaphor I used, was about you and your team, not the salespeople, right? So how are you aggregating all of that so that you can very simply deliver to the salespeople all that they need?
Yeah, my big thing's visuals and notifications. So if I can aggregate it into one dashboard for these individuals, part of it is sitting with my sales org, sitting in a bullpen all day long and listening to calls essentially to see what the pain points are and to watch and see how they start their day, how they prioritize. I think from a marketer standpoint, when you're not ingrained with the sales org, you start to make assumptions and you think, well, they must start their day and they must start with this report. They must prioritize like this because this field's right here in Salesforce and I'm sure they all know about it. It doesn't work that way, especially if you have a siloed, I wouldn't call it siloed, but a global sales organization with individuals in remote areas across the globe. They're all doing it their own way. And in some ways, it all works for all of them. If I can actually come up to speed on what each of them are doing and get them focusing on things in a cohesive manner by bubbling in intent data to actually help them prioritize, to take them from looking at 45% of incoming leads and where do I start to, hey, start with these 15% regardless of source. It's a win at that point. They don't have to do any extra work. I plant seeds, and with each win, you start getting advocates to win over the rest of the org.
Cool. So, Ari, I'm going to confess to you and to my listener that I forgot to put my timer on. So I'm going to go by just my gut and say that I think we've covered a lot of ground here. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is segue over to my summary and kind of run through the high points that we discussed and then ask you to elaborate or fill in any holes. And then we'll get your digital contact information and then bring the episode to a wrap.
That sounds great.
So we began with me correctly pronouncing your last name. So that was a win right out of the gate. And then you gave us a brief introduction to your company, Cumulus Networks. And it's pretty tech. So I'm just going to leave it as you guys are a startup modernizing the data center.
Correct.
And your role there is global demand generation. And you've got a very interesting background, really from net new to lifetime customer value, including some military contractor background. So fascinating background. And when we started the conversation, Ari, about growth marketing through hyper-personalization, and I said, well, why? Why is that a key topic? And you said, well, let's look at conversion rate optimization. If you look at the non-personalized approach, you use the billboard metaphor, which is just about a product, versus a personalized approach that really speaks to the prospect individually. And then you start to move into, mid-market enterprise. You've got to be addressing the people in the decision units specifically about their pain points, and you only have a few seconds to get their attention. So what you said is that this whole growth marketing through hyper-personalization is really grounded in three pillars: acquisition, engagement, and retention. And you said that the execution starts with what you call demand generation 3.0. And demand generation 1.0 is about MQLs, which is a volume play. Demand generation 2.0 is more around generating opportunities and managing to the opportunities and using scoring models and really having some more accountability to delivering opportunity and not just leads. But then demand generation 3.0 is really delivering a digital experience that speaks to individuals that you're selling to, their specific pain points. You've got key messaging that is delivered, again, to those pain points. You're leveraging a marketing tech stack. You're segmenting your content by role, by persona, and then you're delivering those content assets to the salesperson so that you can really deliver it in a way that makes it easy for them to use. You're integrating all that data in a very centralized way using a sophisticated tech stack that allows you to deliver the simplicity of what the salespeople need through visual presentation. And then also allow them to understand exactly what content paths they need so that when they're focused on their accounts, whether it's by vertical or by purchase intent or by stage or by who you're competing against, they know exactly what content paths they need to use in their outreach. And then we talked about what you call people-based marketing. These are my words, Ari. I kind of wrote it down as the antithesis of ABM. It is ABM, but instead of it being account-based focus, it's really about the people focus, right? And I love what you said. You're not there to tell sales how to sell. Instead, you're using predictive analytics on accounts so that you can review the analytics and review metrics that really understands, what the awareness level is from people at accounts, what stage of the buying cycle that they're in, maybe who they're talking to competitively speaking, where are they in terms of their visits to the website, and then mapping that against, intent-based data, which once again you present to salespeople in a visual way with notifications that allows you to really speak to the pain points that the salespeople are addressing when they're talking to prospects. And I love what you said here, and I'm going to close on this point here on the summary, and that is that you and your team are actually listening to sales conversations so that instead of presuming or assuming, you actually hear firsthand how those sales conversations go, what prospects are saying, what their objections are, and so forth, so that you can, as you're honing this very sophisticated approach to people-based marketing, or shall we call it growth marketing through hyper-personalization, you're doing it based on a real understanding of the sales conversations and the sales process. So, all right, I'll leave my summary there and ask you to just give some additional commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your summary was much more eloquent than what I did. So well done. I think my two favorite metrics that I see on average across the board with this go-to-market methodology is an easy 25% increase in time on site for in-market organizations. It's a fantastic metric to see that bubble up. And then a faster time to close. I tout pipeline acceleration. With the right execution of PBM and hyper-personalization, you're looking at a 50% reduction in time to close, because it's not completely on the sales individual's shoulders to somehow, from the top-down selling perspective, get in front of that veto and convince them. They're getting help now. And that person outside of that sales conversation has that messaging in front of them wherever they're at. And so the net is acceleration in that regards. It helps for everything from, the go-to-market perspective, from net new all the way to cross-sell, upsell. And we're in a very exciting space right now, a muddy space as far as marketing technology goes, as far as if you go to any expo hall and look around. But if executed properly, even with a lean, mean team, there's fascinating things you can do. So I'm very happy to be in this field right now.
Well, clearly, Ari, it's obvious you know what you're doing and very impressive. I'm sure my listener has been feverishly taking notes, but of course, I'll remind my listener that we take the notes for you and they'll be available on the show notes page at vengresso.com. So, Ari, where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online and just kind of keep tabs on all this awesome stuff that you're doing on growth marketing through hyper-personalization?
Absolutely. You can, I'm sure if you bang all the letters on your keyboard, you'll find me on LinkedIn. But if you just look at, I think it's in/Ari Capo, I think you'll find me. But if you see something with an alphabet, Ari Capogeannis. That's me. Let's connect. And I love shooting ideas around this. I free up my time to talk about stuff like this. I've connected with competitors before because we're all fighting the same fight in the end and all trying to be the best at what we do.
Yeah, and I've seen you engage on LinkedIn posts, so I commend you for that. Awesome. Well, again, my listener knows that will be linked up in our show notes page at vengresso.com. So, Ari, on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thank you, Bernie.
Zant, the enterprise leader in sales engagement, has authored the definitive guide to sales cadence. This ebook answers questions such as how many times should the rep attempt contact, how long should the rep wait between attempts, and many more. Download your free copy of the definitive guide to sales cadence at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, I invite you to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player. We're available on all the popular podcast listening channels. And hey, I'd love it if you would give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. We publish a show notes page for every episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the interview. Just visit our podcast page at vengresso.com, and that's VENGRESO. And remember, just one S in Vengresso. Hey, while you're there, sign up to get the podcast delivered to your inbox each week. And be sure to check out the Modern Selling Podcast, hosted by our CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, I hope that you'll tune in again next week for another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.